Hi, welcome to the second part of the MaterialUI Autocomplete integration with React form. If you haven't seen the first one, make sure you check it out before you dive into this one. In this video, we're gonna take a look at how we handle data fetching and how we change the available data of one autocomplete based on the value from another one, as well as tackle some refactoring and talk about the separation of concerns and how we can properly split the code so that stuff that's related to the interaction between the data of the fields is in one place, and then how the fields render and validation and so on is in another place. So if that sounds interesting, stick around and let's get started. Let's quickly go over what we have so far, what we created in the previous video. So we have this autocomplete reusable field that we're using to render two autocompletes on the page. We have a simple form with just logging the data, and the options are just hard-coded right here. And the form just defines the type here, a car maker and a car model. Now, let's take this step by step. Let's start creating a reusable component for the entire form and slowly move our way up all the way to integrating with some data fetching mechanism. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy over all the app folder, actually file, into a car form.tsx, and I'm going to get rid of the styles. I'm going to name this car form. Let's do that. And I'm going to import it in app. So we have a starting point for our usable component. Car form. And for now, it doesn't do anything new. We just import it like that. Quick note on the name. I prefer to have an export const because that way, everywhere in the code base, I'll have the same name. Or other developers will have to make an effort to break from this pattern and name my components something else. So that's something I recommend. Okay, let's see what the car form should have. So I think we will actually no longer use the form here. So let's just clean everything up from here. We will probably send over these options as car maker options or car makers. Let's do car makers. And also car models is gonna have options as well. Now I'm gonna send over the same object because why not for the beginning, and we'll see how we expand this into various other input types as we move along. It's also going to have an on submit ready, let's say, and this one will take data. Right now we don't know what the data is, and we're just going to console log on submit ready with data, like so. So now we can go over and copy these properties like so, and we can start defining an interface for our car form. Let's say interface car form props. We're going to transform this one into the prop that we just created, but our data is actually known, so we know that this type of object is going to be what React form makes available for us. So let's define that as a type, car form values, like so. Of course, this is the place where zinfer or yup something infer would come into play if you're using a scheme or something like that. We're not going to do that in this video. There's a different video, the first one related to that. Check it out if you're interested. All right, this car form values will be the data that gets submitted. And now I think we can just say, hey, these are the props that we have, and we can hook over our onSubmit ready in here. So React hook form will just call our prop from the outside of the component. We also have these two option arrays, which are of type ID label array. So car makers and car models. Let's do car models, plural. So it's going to be car models of this type and car makers of this type as well. And now we should be able to replace those options which are already here. Let's remove them because we're sending them as props. And now we're going to have props.carMakers and props.carModels. All right, let's see if this works. So let's open the console, and yeah, it seems to be working fine. I am able to submit. Separation of concerns started and working just fine. Now, what do we want to do? Well, if we change a value from car makers, we want to change the available options that are here. So first of all, let's make two arrays. Let's do car models 1 and another one, car models 2, and switch between those two when the ID of the car make changes. So I'll rename all of those with car model, and let's do 5, 6, 7, and 8, like so. And also replace the IDs, like so. And now we can send over the car models first and see if this is working. And yes, it is working fine. Now we would like to do a switch between these two. So we're going to see how the business logic of switching the data would look like. What do we need in order for this code to run? So in order for our business logic to run, we need some sort of place, a function that will run that. And right now we don't have anything in the CarForm API that allows us to do it. So let's just add it. Let's imagine we have on car maker changed callback. And let's imagine we'll get the ID of string, right? Because we are saving the string there in the form, right? We have car maker string, but we also know that it might be null, right? When we clear the fields. So let's also do that. Let's say, hey, the ID might be either a string or null. And this is where we have our function that can run and react to the car maker changing. All right, so we can copy over this type interface, go into car form, and just define it here as a prop. Now, where should this go? Well, on the first field. If the first field changes, we would like to make a change and basically run this console log initially. How do we do that? Well, the same way as we did with the first layer of the prop. We can imagine we have an onChange on our autocomplete field, and this onChange just passes over on ConMaker changed. And if we hover over, it's going to look like this. We can control click, go to the autocomplete field. Let's quickly take a look at what we had in the previous video before we make alterations. So we are accepting a placeholder, an array of options which need to have an ID and label, and we don't care what else they have. As long as they have this, we're fine. And a name, so basically what field or entity in React Hook form we want to link into our reusable component, and the control, which is a magical object that React Hook Forms just sends us over, and it basically enables us to have control components integrated with it. So now we can just extend it with an onChange, like so. I'm gonna make it optional because I don't want to always provide this additional callback. I just want it sometimes. In our case, only on the first field. Notice we also have an onChange from React Hook Form, so we need to be really careful to just call the onChange from our props near the onChange from React Hook Form if we want both of them to run. So in this case, I'm just gonna extract this into a resolved ID like so, and I'm gonna pass over the same thing in both places. Of course, this is an optional param, so I'm gonna have this question mark before, so it just runs it if it exists, and otherwise it ignores the function call. Why am I doing this and not some sort of ping pong between watching the values, the use effect, or something like that? Because this way I have less render cycles and I don't have to rely on React to step in between the onChange from React hook form and the on change from my code from outside the form. This way, it's like a programmatic top-down thing that I have more control over it. Let's see if it works. Let's refresh the page and just change the options. And there we have it. We actually have the IDs available where outside the form without submitting. And if we clear, we get null. So basically, if we have an ID, we can decide which one of those values to keep in our second autocomplete. Now, how do we do that? Well, if we want to change something inside our app, inside our component, which happens to be called app, we need a state. So let's keep that in state. Let's keep the options from the second autocomplete in a use state hook. By default, let's actually make it null. So it's gonna be null if it's not initialized, or the exact same API as whatever we had here. So I'm just gonna copy over the options type again. All right, this is gonna be car models, set car models. And let's go ahead and set the car models to the second option if ID is equal to 1 or ID is equal to maybe 3, right? So now we have 1 and 3 going to one array, and the other two should probably go to the first one. So let's do car models 1 like so. So if I press 2 or 4, I get the first array, otherwise I get something else. So now I have car model 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I choose the second option, I still get the same thing. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on. I'm gonna log, so I'm logging, I have those. Let's also log what, oh, never mind guys, we're not sending over the proper car model state, so let's hook that in. Now it's complaining that it might be null, so let's make sure we default to an empty array, refresh, and we should be good to go. So we have car model 1, 2, 3, and now we have car model 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Kind of nice, right? We already are switching the data. We're not doing data fetching yet, but we see how we might interact with the options available in the second field. But what's going on here? Why are we allowed to submit? Turns out, if we just change the available options, React hook form won't react in any way. It won't change what value it has inside unless we tell it to specifically. And in this case, it still has the option from the first car models array. So it still has, I think, car model 2. Let's switch back to option 2, and now we actually see car model 2 selected. So we're not really there yet in terms of the form functionality. We just swapped the available arrays. So how might we clear this field? Hint, hint, we're going to have to clear with some sort of clear API from React form the input. Now, the clear API is actually called reset. So we're going to reset the field, meaning we're going to clear the value, errors, or whatnot it had inside it with just one simple function call. But we'll need to have a way of calling it from outside the form. So basically, we would like this field to change its value, its default value, or like selected value completely. And we know we want to do that change right here in this function. So let me just extract this function. Let's do handle car maker changed as a callback. Handle car maker change, use callback. I'm just using a callback for fun here. There's not a lot of things re-rendering or anything like that. So I don't think there's like a huge performance impact if we don't have a callback, but let's add it. Why not? It's probably best if we do. So how do we know right here that we want to maybe reset the field values? How do we know that? How can we tell the form to change something programmatically? Just like I did in the previous video, we're going to use a imperative handle and a ref and we're gonna programmatically call some functionality from the component, from the child component using the ref. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go into the car form and create another interface. This time it's going to be car form API. It's going to be reset field as a, or like a clear field. Let's just keep it reset field for consistency with the use form API. We're going to take a name. So the name of the field in this case is going to be car maker or car model. How do we say car maker or car model here in a expandable, maintainable way? We take the keys of our values like so, and we say we don't care about the return type. Let's also export this because we'll need it in our app. So here in our app, we will need this type in order to understand what ref values we have available. And now we need to make our component accept a ref, which means we need a forward ref call like so. So React will pass the reference to our component so we can inject additional things in it. It's going to be ref, and it's going to be of type forwarded ref, I think. Yeah. And we're going to pass over our car form API like so. Now we can use imperative handle. We'll see what we set to it, what we return, and we're going to say, you know what, we're not going to change it at all. So this is like non-changing API. It's not, it doesn't participate to the rendering and the render updates of React. What do we return? Well, we need to return a reset field function like so, which does what? Well, it should do, at least for now, a log reset field with that name. Let's see how we might reach this console log, how we might trigger it. If we go into the app, here we'll have the option of having a form ref, which is going to be of use ref. By default, it's going to be null. So we're going to indicate that React should handle setting this. We're not going to handle it. And it's going to be of type car form API, which should be automatically imported like so. All right. So we have this value available. Let's send it over as ref. And now, if I move this up one line, one chunk of code, we could theoretically do current dot reset field, and we actually have type safety here, so we can say car model needs to be reset. Let's refresh and see if this works. I'm selecting something and I am reaching reset field of car model inside the form. That's nice, but how do we actually clear the value? Well, we have this reset field method right here that we can just call like so. But that's not great because now we have this error right here. I mean, error. We have this warning like, hey, you know, you should depend on the reset field. You should add it here. And one thing that you could do is just add it, saying, yeah, let's recreate this use imperative handle every time reset field changes. And then you would say, oh, but I actually know that the reset field never changes because this is a function that is the same reference every single time, and so on and so forth. But you don't really care about this. You should probably just understand that this use imperative handle is used only for one time. So you're creating it only one time. And if you want that meaning to be immediately available, you can remove it from there and keep it in a ref. So I can use a ref right here, like so, and just call .current here. And now it is a lot more clear that our use imperative handle doesn't really have updates when some dependencies change. So it's only once created, and we just add this additional line, which indicates, hey, you know, actually the linter doesn't really figure out that this ref field, reset field is not re-rendering or it's not updating during the execution of our form. Let's get rid of our reset field for now and see what happens. So I have these two options selected. I can press submit. And now if I change the option and press submit again, car model no longer misbehaves. So let's see what happens if I'm not calling that reset field again. So it's clear what's going on. I submit, it's fine. I change the option to option 3 and I can still submit because the data is still there. If I call reset, things are just fine. Of course, refresh the page. I can choose one option, I can submit, I can choose a different option, and when I submit, it's saying, nope, you're supposed to send over a car model again because we just cleared the data for you with this call. Awesome, great. So where are we? We're here, we're ready to I think we're ready to get data, right? We should be in a good position to start fetching our first data, which is going to be something prettier for those options. Now, I'm going to make a new folder and just pretend we have an API here, which is some sort of wrapper on top of an actual fetch or Axios call or whatnot. It's going to be a fake car API.ts. And I'm just going to paste over a couple of methods. All right, so I imagine we're going to have two endpoints that will send different type of data just so we can see how we map the data correctly. The first API endpoint will return the array with this for car maker slash brand slash whatever. And the second endpoint will return one of these arrays. And thanks to our little ChatGPT friend reader here, we were able to create this really fast. So it looks like this. We have a fetch car makers, which waits for 1 second and returns the 4 options. And then we have a second API call that supposedly gets the ID of the car maker and knows what models are available just for that one. This might not be the best use case of data fetching, but it should illustrate how you can work with it regardless of your use case. So let's go and start fetching our data here in our app. Where will we do it? Well, when our component mounts, we will start fetching the car model brands. Sorry. Quick note: you probably don't need to use a use effect. You're probably gonna use whatever data fetching system you have in place in your application. I'm just gonna use this because it's super simple. Everybody knows about it, and hopefully everybody knows you should try to avoid this as much as possible when you're writing your actual application code, because use effects are kind of the new root of all evil in React applications these days. Anyhow, we have a fetch car makers method here that we can call like so. And I would love if in a next update Code Sandbox will support imports like Visual Studio Code, but for now it just doesn't really know how to get my method from fake car API. And yeah, let's dot then it and see what we get. So we have a response, and let's also catch, because you know, you're supposed to catch all your promises. Catch, come on, man. Error and console error, like so. There we go. What do we do with the response? Well, we map the data. Let's map the response. What's the type of the response? It's an array. It has a different type than what we want to send over to our components, to our autocomplete. We know that our autocomplete needs an ID. We have an ID, and it also needs a label. And we don't have the label. We have a name here. So let's just do this simple mapping like so. And how can car makers receive this data? Well, again, we need a state. So we're going to have it right here, use state. And I think I can copy over this nastily formatted state defined at the top. This is going to be car brands. Let's do car brands or models, or set car brands like so. And I can just set this like so. All right. Now car brands can be passed over in car makers, and it's complaining because again it can be null. So let's default to an empty array, refresh, and there we go. We actually get the data, and we're able to select better looking car makers than before. All right, now when we're making a change to the car makers, we want different data to be available here. Well, we already saw how we fetch for the first one. Let's fetch for the second one, just like we did before. Let's make this async this time. And right here, I think we can change this to be const car models equal await. And what was the name of the function? Our new function was fetch car models by ID, and we just need to send over the ID. So fetch this, update the import, and I think we only do this if we have an ID, right? Because the ID can also be null, and we don't want to fetch for a null value. We only want to fetch if the ID exists. Whoops. And we will set the data to whatever we receive from here. What do we receive? I think we still need to map, so let's just do the map in place. So it's going to be something like that. We need an ID, which is going to be options.model ID apparently, and a label, which is going to be option.model name. We should be good to go. We can get rid of that. Now, there's one extra thing that I want to do, and I'm just gonna do it right now. We want to reset the car models to an empty array, maybe null, when we start fetching the new data. Why? Because we don't want, for a brief moment of time, to clear the field, but have the users select models that existed only on the previous value of the dropdown, the first dropdown. So let's say I have Toyota. Actually, let me exemplify this because it might make more sense. Let's make this API take 10 seconds to respond, right? So we have this second one will take 10 seconds to respond. And we're picking Hyundai. Now we have to wait. So now we get the options from Hyundai. But if I quickly switch to Toyota, I can still see the values from the Hyundai options because this API is taking a lot of time to complete. So I actually see this invalid state for a moment. Now, if I reset the options, I will no longer see, for example, the Toyota values when I switch to Volkswagen. See, I see no options while that's happening. All right, so we have data fetching, we have reactive data fetching. We're changing some values with new values from the server. One of our fields changes its data. What else is there? Well, there's one thing that we should probably add, and that is a way of letting the users know that they have to wait. Initially, when the page loads, for a brief moment of time, we have absolutely no options available in the car makers. How might we show them that they should still wait? Well, there's an actually quite interesting trick that we can use, which is with the field set in our forms. We can create a field set right here, and we can disable the entire form quite easily. So let's go ahead and do that and see how we might pass an additional flag to our form. Let's first style this so it has no border and maybe no padding as well. And let's see what happens if we disable it. So I'll just say disabled. Notice I am no longer able to click the button. I am truly trying to click the car maker and car model, and it doesn't do anything. And if I remove this, it works as intended. So if a field set gets props, maybe is locked like so, we should be able to programmatically lock and unlock our form. So if it loads, we can lock it. If it submits, we can lock it, and so on and so forth. I'm gonna add this as a optional boolean, and in our app where we instantiate the car form, I'll say, hey, you know, this form is locked if there are no car brands. So if car brands is null, just lock it, right? It is null initially. So if our API, if the car maker API takes longer to load, we will see a disabled form. Now, of course, apart from this, you can send over a message, or you could even propagate this prop to the field to show some sort of loading indicator on top of the field, not log the entire form. But the idea is just the same. And I wanted to show you how, field set works. You probably didn't know about it. Let me know in the comment section below if you did or if you didn't, and what you think about this approach. And you might think we're done, but there's actually a little bit more that I would like to talk about with you folks today. And I mentioned it a couple of times. You pass this prop to the field. You pass this prop to the field. We're passing a lot of props just from the application layer through the form to the fields. That's not great. Why isn't it great? Because as forms grow in complexity, you're gonna keep piling on additional flags and additional props, and all of a sudden you're gonna wake up with a form that has like 40 props, and you're gonna need a user manual to basically figure out how to properly configure your component. There is an approach that we can use that can mitigate some of those potential pitfalls, and it has some drawbacks, but it also has some cool strengths. So let's take a look at it. We can basically remove those three props completely from our form, and we can make our form accept children. So we could theoretically reach a point where our form actually receives these fields as children. Now, it doesn't have to receive all its fields as children. It could receive chunks of the form, or it could receive multiple types of children. So for example, it can have a slot for the car makers or the car selection, and then something else for the user, or the address group of fields, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to use the children like so for this demonstration, but bear in mind it can be extended to even more capabilities. So our car form could just drop this three props from here, and it could just start to accept children. Right? And we could just go in here and pretty much clear everything that was there and just pass over the children. Now we have some errors, so let's fix those. We have a React hook form field here that we need to import. We need to pass the car models now directly to our first autocomplete. Actually, no, the second one was the car models, and then the first one was car brands. And let's just copy over what we have here in the commented code, because that's how our fields will work. And now we also have to handle car maker changes for the first field, which is surprisingly easy, right? And now we have a smaller API for the car form. Now we're not there yet because control no longer is available for autocomplete fields. So we need to get rid of it. And if we get rid of it, we're gonna go down the rabbit hole of errors. So we need to do a little bit of refactoring here. And if we take a look at the React autocomplete field, notice we have the control right here. So this control, it was supposed to be passed from React hook form from here, but we're no longer passing it. So we need access to it. And how can we get access to that? Well, we could go through the docs and follow the documentation from React hook form, which says use the form provider, or we can set our own. And I will set my own context for just the control, and I'll tell you why in a bit. So the React hook form provider re-renders the children a lot. So if the control component gets into loading state, or if the form is submitting, or if there's some sort of validation going on, every single component that uses the provider will re-render. But I know for a fact that we are not using any of those fields. We only care about the control. That's the only thing that comes from the Yahoo form. The rest is props that we send over. So I know for a fact that I only need a control. I don't need anything else. So I'm going to make a context that only passes over this control. So let's do just that. I'll quickly create a control context here. And by the way, this can be reused between forms. You don't have to create one for every form that you have in your application. And the type of this context is just going to be the control that we have from Yahoo form. By default, it's going to be null. So let's make sure we don't have any syntax errors or anything like that. Oh yeah, export const like so. Control is the type of this one. So I can import it from Yahoo form. So let's get rid of that as well. And now we can provide just the control in here. So we have a provider, value is control, like so. And at the end, we have the closing tag. Oh, and we also need to make sure that this is a very permissive control. So control of any, because we don't really know what type of control we're going to have in each form. Cool, awesome. Now, if we go into our autocomplete field, we should be able to use that, that control. So control context should be available. So we should be able to get control by saying use context, React, and give me this from the main form. Notice that this probably needs to be somewhere else, so not in the car forms. So if you have like 10 forms, it's gonna be in a utils folder and all your fields will have access to it and all your forms will be able to provide values for it. I'm not gonna do that now, but just make sure you keep that into account. I will remove the control from there and I will default to props control if it's passed or not. If not, I'm gonna use the context. So if the context exists, I'm gonna use that one, and if it doesn't exist, I'm gonna use the control. Another way to do it is gonna be maybe context control here. I'd say maybe it's best to have this additional const because it's gonna make sure that less experienced developers don't end up using conditional hooks. You don't want to encourage anyone to make that mistake. And if you have some sort of conditional statement and assignment, it might indicate that you're okay or that this component will work with conditional hooks. And there's no such thing, at least in React. All right, so we are passing our control from the context in the case of the car form. And yeah, it seems to be working fine. I'm able to submit. The data is coming from the API nicely. We have the loading, if you will, the locking of the form, and everything seems to be in order. But now our React Hook form fields are working just fine from outside the form. Let's see what error we get here. So control is missing. Oh, of course, control needs to become a optional property, like so. So that's it, folks. That's it for today. I think I'm gonna wrap up the whole form field exploration with this video. If there's something else that you wanna see, let me know in the comment section below. And if you have any other suggestions on what type of content I should take a look at next, I would also be interested in hearing your thoughts. So thanks for watching and I hope we'll see you next time.